Churches that demand that their musicians pay tithes are very controlling at best and outright toxic at worst. And there are so many church musicians being manipulated into doing this. And if you've ever felt pressured to tithe as part of your role in the church, you may be being manipulated too. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to deal with this and give you a definitive answer on whether or not you should be required to tithe or not. So I remember a while back, I was asked to take a job at this church, and they offered me like $500 a Sunday, and I decided to take it. And when I got there that Sunday and I did that first service, one of the church leaders came out and handed me my check. The check only read $450, and I was like, what's going on with this? So I immediately took this check and went to the church leaders and like, yo, this ain't right. Like, we agreed on $500. What's up with this $450? And you know what they told me? They were like, well, yeah, your salary is $500, but we took tithes out of your check. And I was like, what? And I almost lost it because it was like a slap in the face. Like, how you gonna hire me and not tell me about this beforehand? So long story short, we couldn't come to an agreement on it, so I quit shortly after. And pastors and churches that demand and do this kind of thing to musicians has been a thing for a pretty long time. And as you just heard, a lot of them will take that money for tithes out of your check, kind of like the government does with taxes. And not to mention, if you had the church taking taxes out of your check as well as tithes out, like, you coming up way short. But honestly, is this just a way for churches to get over on you without paying you what you asked for? So you get hired at a church and you ask for a salary of $400 a week, and they take 1/10 out of that, which leaves you with $360. And then most of them will just do that thing where they'll round it down to $350 for some odd reason. Again, not asking you to tithe, but forcing you to tithe. And ironically, it's usually the churches like this that just try to work the hell out of you and demand that you are there 4, 5, 6 times a week and be at every service that they have. Like, I didn't know that I signed up for a full-time job with overtime without benefits, by the way. And the thing is, churches being money hungry is and has always been one of the biggest gripes that people have about churches in general. They do that thing where they'll say, who in the building is believing for a miracle and will trust God with a $10,000 sacrificial offering? And they'll do all of the speaking and coercing and say something like, God is telling me that there is at least 17 people in here that has $10,000 and you need to get up and trust God with that $10,000 right now. Then when they're finished with that, they'll move down to $9,500 and do the same thing. And then they'll just keep moving down in numbers of like $500 increments until they get to like $100 or something like that. And then you look up and 3 hours have passed. And on top of them doing all of that, they want to keep tithes from your check. So why is this demanding and requiring that you tithe from your church pay thing particularly problematic? Well, it's for some really eye-opening reasons. First, nobody, and I mean nobody, should be forced to pay tithes. Giving 1/10 of your income is something that should solely be decided by you and not something that's held over your head as some sort of ransom. So whatever pay that's agreed upon should be given to you in fully, and then you can decide to fulfill any sort of tithing obligations you feel you have. And I'll say something that's controversial here, but not only should you not be required to pay tithes, you shouldn't even be required to pay tithes at the church you're playing for. And people will argue and say that if you're a member of that church, you should tithe there and all of that. Well, how about this? Just take my name off the membership roll, problem solved. Now, also, the rules of tithing have changed dramatically over the years, mostly in the sense that nobody can seem to agree upon what a tithe really is, where it should really come from, or even if you should pay it altogether. Creflo Dollar, one of the biggest preachers in the world, came out a couple of years ago and said that tithing is not something that we should do or that it should even be required. So you got that perspective while you got the fire and brimstone churches handing out tithing envelopes and standing there and waiting for their members to fill it out before they move on with the service. It's almost like being in a band where half the members feel that the music should be played note for note, and then the other half feels that it should be improvised a little bit, and then they want to dock your pay when you get something wrong. And in addition to all of this, church musicians already contribute a lot to the church in terms of their time and their talent. And requiring them and demanding that they tithe in this way is sort of undervaluing them a bit. And some of them go as far as to do things like shun you and treat you bad and say stuff like, we can't really accept you if you don't let us keep 1/10 of your pay. So what is the solution to this, and how do you deal with it if you're faced with it? Well, right before we get to that, if you're getting value out of this video, or if you've gotten value out of any of my videos here on this channel, do me a quick favor and subscribe to the channel right now. That helps with everything we're doing here, and I would really appreciate it. So one of the things that I tell a lot of musicians that's super important is that you can't let the church take advantage of you and run over you. Because if you allow it, they will chew you up and spit you out and not give you a second thought. And to be fair about it, some of them are well-meaning and all of that. It's just that so many of them get caught up in their own selfish pursuits and selfish ideals and all that, and they forget about one of the most important aspects of the modern church, which is the music, which is taken care of by the musicians. And I know that what I'm about to say can be really, really hard to do because I've been there. But something that I've learned over the years is that you have to speak up and stand up for yourself. And again, I completely understand wanting to be humble and wanting to be a team player and not wanting to be confrontational and all of that. But it's being that way that opens up the door for people to just run right over you. So if you're faced with this situation in any way, it may be time to make a phone call or call a meeting and speak up and stand up about what you believe to be right in this situation. Now, next is something that not a lot of musicians know about. But did you know that if you're on salary at a church and they're taking taxes out of your church, or they're giving you a form to fill out for your own taxes at the end of the year, that actually withholding pay and tithes for religious purposes is something that's illegal? So them taking money out of your check for tithes can be something that can get them in some serious legal issues. Now, just a quick disclaimer on this. I am not a legal expert or a tax or money specialist in any kind of way, so you need to do your own research on this. But if it's the case that this is something true for your situation, this is something that you can bring to them as a thing for them to protect their own interests. Because it's probably the case that not many of them that's taking tithes out of your check and all of that are aware that it's something that can be illegal. So in a lot of cases, you can just tell them about this and problem solve. Now, although this is something you understand how to handle now, it won't matter if you don't even know how much you should be getting paid overall. And that's something that I discuss in this video right here. So head over and check it out now so you're better equipped to handle this situation.